Hey, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co, and today I'm giving you first impressions of the Flames of Fafnir. Flames of Fafnir is a 1-to-4 player game in which players are trying to take down the dragon over here, who I assume his name is Fafnir, as before the dragon slowly but surely destroys the entire village. I should note, this is a prototype, rules and components subject to change, and I'll have a link to the crowdfunding campaign down below. But with that, let's go into a general idea, general notes as far as how the game plays, and then tell you my thoughts and opinions, as well as why I'm calling it first impressions and not a review. To that end, Flames of Fafnir is a 1-to-4 player game. It is a tableau building game, which players are going to be taking a turn every single round. You take a turn. The turn consists of either moving or peeking at a quest. This is probably more information than you need right now, before taking one of 5 actions. But before we dive into that, the general idea is Fafnir over here is going to be slowly rolling marbles at the village. I said marbles, I meant fireballs, obviously. Fafnir, across the course of the game, is going to be adding fireballs to his belly over here, heating them up, and then taking them and dropping them down his little dragon over here, until they eventually knock something down, possibly heroes, possibly boards, possibly various constructions your heroes have built, until he slowly takes down the entire village. That's what Fafnir is trying to do. You, on the other hand, are trying to stop him, and the way you're going to do that is by building things that get in his way. There's a whole host of various constructions you can build in this game. Over here on your player board, you're going to have different things, from barricades that go on the board, from these other buildings and more buildings and watchtowers and all these things that will help you in different ways. But as you place them down on the board, when you roll a marble, and all of a sudden that marble might be affected instead by the thing in its way. Look at that. That marble instead did not hit the village. It got turned back. Now the buildings might be destroyed along the way. Things will happen. Heroes that get hit have a consequence. There's a whole set of rules to go through. But the general idea is, through the construction of buildings in the game, you'll be doing 2 things. You'll be improving your own tableau, which is a good thing for you, but you'll also be slowing down the destruction of the village. This is important because despite everything you see over here, this is not a cooperative game. This is not a game where it's all of you against the dragon. No, there's a point system over here. You're trying to gain points as you stop Fafnir from taking on the village, but if Fafnir does take on the village, you all lose. So there is a way where you all lose. Alternatively, there's ways where you just win. There's also a way where someone can take control of Fafnir. Someone who in the course of the game can actually take control of Fafnir, at which point Fafnir's general AI will be switched out for a set of a few cards, which gives the player taking control of Fafnir a bit more agency over how he's trying to self-destruct the village, while the other players still try to build defenses and still try to stop that from happening. So that's kind of a high-level idea of what's going on. You as players are building up your tableau, you're building buildings that will help the board, but will also help you, and you're trying to stop Fafnir from destroying your village, while Fafnir tries to destroy your village, or a player may take control of Fafnir and try to accelerate that process, and if they do say they win, otherwise they lose the game. That's the kind of high level. A slightly more detailed aspect, and we won't be going into a full rules overview over here, but the general idea of this over here, the slightly more in-depth look of it, is that in the game, you're going to be taking 1 of 5 actions every turn. You're going to combine those 1 of 5 actions with either a movement or a peeking at one of these quests over here. When you peek at a quest, you can go ahead and look at it, see what's on the back over here, and that's going to tell you what things you need to do to trade and to accomplish that little raid over there. And you'll put a little marker on it to show that you've peeked at it, because this is not a memory game. You can go back to anything you've peeked at. Alternatively, you can move. You can go ahead and move in the game. You have a basic movement, but you could upgrade that movement as well through the buildings you're going to build. In general, there's a bunch of buildings you can build, and they all have different ways that they make you better, faster, and stronger in the game. So you have either peeking at a quest or moving. From there, you have 5 different actions you can take in addition to that. You can either gather resources. When you gather resources, you're going to look at where your hero is, and you'll take resources, 2 resources from everything your hero is next to, but you also get 1 resource from every watchtower, from a tower that your tower is next over here. If you have this over here, you get 1, 1, and 1, but also 2, 2, and 2, based on the structure of the board, and more if you have even more of these out on the board. So you're trying to build those so that when you take a gather action, you can go ahead and slide your resources up on this track even further. Now I should note over here, you'll notice that on this spot over here, you can't actually move past this line until you build this. When you build this, you'll get increased movement, but you also will get, when you build this, you'll get increased movement, but you also have the ability to control more resources, to have more resources in the bank. So that's going to be 1 action, which is where you gather. The other action is where you build. We talked about 2 buildings already, but when you build in the game, you're going to take one of your buildings, you'll pay the cost, that's one of the reasons you want those resources, and you'll put the building on the board. They have a ton of effects, well, I guess 5 effects, because it's like 5 buildings. They're going to have different effects in the game, from points you gather, from resources you gather, from additional movement, from additional gathering, different things the game is going to do to give you more stuff. Or when you take down these quests where you have an automatic guaranteed success against any of these quests, there's a bunch of different stuff that the buildings will do, and there's a bunch of different formats that the buildings have as far as the ways they're going to get in the way of Fafnir's giant fireballs of flame rolling across the board. That's going to be 2 actions. We have gather, we have build. You also have pray, which is when you're next to these lines, 1, 2, or 3, you're going to have the option to go ahead and move your token around the board, get getting the benefits from anything you cross in these specific areas over here, but also the benefit of whatever you land on, which is often going to be cards. Cards are going to come from this entirely separate board over here. We have a full board of cards over here, which also has some player score tokens that just fell off. But you can have a board of cards over here that tracks one of the elements, where Fafnir is going to slowly be moving this up, and when he gets to the end, he's going to just go ahead and destroy one of those regardless, so you need to be careful. Even if you can perfectly defend all his marbles, there's still going to be a timer in play taking you down slowly. But you also have all these cards which can be helpful in both taking down Fafnir, or just discarded in general for the use of their abilities while tracking the score as well. That's going to be the other action, which is the prey action. So prey action is going to give you cards, it's going to give you points, it's going to give you resources, and a lot of those cards have a lot of fun things they can do. The fourth action is taking on a raid. Raiding these quests over here, those quests you looked at to see what you need, you can go ahead and go on them, gain the various benefits, including the tokens themselves. The tokens themselves are often going to be instrumental in taking down Fafnir, because we haven't gotten into it, but Fafnir has a whole way that they're vulnerable as far as different things that go into the chambers, different stuff that may or may not represent additional challenges. In this case, that's nothing. Alternatively, specific runes you need, either from cards or from quests, to take them down. Which, speaking of which, the last action is taking down Fafnir. When you go ahead, you go head to head with Fafnir, try to take him out, attacking his chambers one at a time. You can go through a sequence of attacks this way, but you're going to need runes and or cards to take him down, and as the game progresses, he may be getting more powerful. Speaking of which, after all players have taken a turn, Fafnir takes his turn. You're going to go ahead and reveal a card and do whatever the card says, which will have different things from Fafnir moving along the board over here to go to whatever spot next he needs to take down a thing. Because as you might imagine, if this is down, this is down, this is down, well, we still have this over here, how is he going to get to that? Well, in general, there is a bit of an AI where he is slowly but surely trying to creep towards the things that are left in the game to shoot his fireballs across the board at them. He's also going to be prepping fireballs into his belly and then unleashing fireballs as well. There's a bunch of things he's going to be doing as far as, and then the timer track over there where there's that auto kill in play. So there's a bunch of ways where Fafnir is taking his AI turn to basically make sure he does as damaging as possible. You're going to have additional tokens in play for these and these over here, depending on the player count, giving you some degree of player balance around. The more players are in the game, the more obstructions they can go ahead and throw up against Fafnir, and therefore the more bad things Fafnir is going to be inherently throwing at you across the course of the game. That is basically the idea of the Flames of Fafnir. The one element we talked about is when one player can take control of Fafnir, which will replace your standard deck with some basic cooler cards, or give you more cooler cards you can do that are stronger, and you can use those against the players, and you are operating with more agency, and the players have to play a little bit of catch-up game to stay ahead of you. And with that, we're going to go ahead and dive into my first impressions of the game with a note about my experience with the game and why I'm calling this first impressions, which is Fafnir is inherently a physics-based game. This is a physics-based game which is going to have you rolling marbles against the players, trying to knock down the players and or the walls and various things along the way. And my first time diving into this game, was on TTS, which TTS doesn't have the best physics. I then dove into the game again with the first prototype marbles, and those unfortunately were way too strong, making it so that the game didn't have a chance unless you were Fafnir. Unless you were playing as Fafnir. The only way you could win is Fafnir is basically going to demolish the players. You didn't have much of a chance in the game, and that meant the player who took control of Fafnir was completely going to demolish the game. And then finally, I got the newest prototype marbles, which just basically lower the size of the marbles over here to make it a slightly more balanced and give players a fighting edge against Fafnir, which is a big improvement to the game, but it does mean that by now I've had different experiences with the game, and well, I have some complaints regardless of the balance of the marbles, but the balance of the marbles is a key intrinsic part of the game experience, and it's been a slow pathway towards getting closer to the right balance as you possibly can. And so I very much hesitate to call this a full review, because it's a physics-based board game with a prototype that I don't think, even with the improved marbles, I don't think is fully where it needs to be, even though it is better. So it's hard for me to give you a fully formed opinion. I can just tell you about my experience about it, the things I like, the things I definitely don't like, and then the areas where we kind of have to see a finished game to be able to give a more informed opinion on. So it's a first impressions, it'll have thoughts, it'll have opinions, but it won't have a score because I can't based on where the game is right now. And with that, let's go ahead and dive into the things I like, don't like, and can see what's not liking. Although, let's start off with ease of play, because I think ease of play is going to be the first thing over here. Ease of play on this is, I would say, I kind of rattled through this teach fairly quickly, and that's because I left out a lot of actual details you would need to know for any number of things in the game. But you should hopefully have a general high-level idea of how to play, based on what I just said, but high-level is the key words. This game, I would say, is far from the most complicated game I've played, or taught, or learned. It's far from there. But I do think the type of game that it is, especially with that kind of semi-toy element and physics element and all that, versus the intricacy of how many rules there are and how many things you have to know, and how many there's a lot of stuff that goes on in this game relative to the game weight. So I think the rules teach relative to the game weight, I think that's not great. It's not the most complicated rules teach, But a game like this I would almost expect to be easier or more strategic. It has a lot of rules overhead with less of the strategy that I usually associate with that level of rules overhead. Game time itself can vary. It depends on how quickly you get destroyed by the dragon, but if you are able to survive through it, I think you are looking at roughly a 90 minutes to 2 hours long experience, shorter if you die very quickly. As far as what I like and don't like and can see others not liking, starting off with what I like, which is in general the tableau building is going to be my favorite thing of the game. Taking your buildings, placing them out on the board, and getting the various benefits of those buildings, not just in how it stops Fafnir from dominating the players, but from how it helps you as a player get stronger and more powerful. The order in which you build things is going to be key. Are you trying to get those watchtowers out to get extra resources? Are you trying to build those little barricades so you can get extra movement? The order you build things is going to give you, the players, your own developed asymmetry in the across the course of the game. And when you combine that with the fun things in the game, like the power cards over here, the general resource gathering, the taking down the quest, and occasionally, of course, trying to ride Fafnir, you have a lot of things going on in the game that lean into the fun element. And speaking of the fun element, rolling marbles, because I will complain about the marble situation soon, don't worry, but rolling marbles across the board is fun to see how that develops. It is fun to roll marbles down, see who gets hit, see which players are knocked out of the way, see which buildings survive, see which players got their reward, because by the way, when your buildings get destroyed, you get a reward for that too, because the fact that you get a reward from your tableau, you get a reward for having the building in play, you get a reward for when your building gets destroyed. There's a lot of ways you're getting rewarded, so you are incentivized to build buildings in the game. And so the action system is fast-paced and rewarding. You have 5 basic actions. Again, you have a either move or peek, but then after that, you have 5 actions. It can go fairly quickly as far as the actions you're taking and the way you're trying to find your own movement forward, your own pathway forward. And there's a strong degree of chaos combined with fun, combined with strategy, combined with tableau building that all makes this an overall fun experience. We're going to come back to that overall fun experience soon. As far as things I don't like in the game, first of all, the biggest thing for me is going to be the semi-co-op aspect. The fact that a player can take control of the dragon, and the dragon then gets stronger, in a game where the dragon already, and again, physics exceptions and things aside, the dragon already feels pretty strong and, kind of knocking things down, and the player takes control of them, makes them even stronger. It kind of really makes it, and this is even worse at lower player counts, by the way. If you're playing this game at 2 players, good luck. Again, this might be balanced more this might be balanced more in the final game, but currently a 2-player game, the player who takes control of the dragon wins, period. In a 3-player game or a 4-player game, the player who takes control of the dragon has a strong chance of winning. In a 2-player game, it's just, I'm very curious to see how this would be tweaked or adjusted, but right now it just doesn't work. And in general, I don't like semi-cooperative games. I don't like that aspect of, let's all work together to fight the dragon, but really one of us is winning, but really even one of us might not win, because really if someone's trying to take control of the dragon, because it's usually an advantage to do so, and that player is probably going to win. Not for sure, but probably going to win, especially depending on the player count. It's not a fun dynamic. There are many elements of this game that can be fun and that are fun, but that dynamic kind of takes away from my enjoyment of the experience. If I'm the one who's taking control of the dragon, I feel like I'm winning and I didn't earn it, and if somebody else takes control of the dragon, I feel like everything we've been doing this whole time is for naught. And neither of those are particularly fun experiences, so the semi-co-op experience kind of ruins the experience for me right now. Now, I don't know if that would be better if everything was balanced, if you adjusted around the player count balance and the proper physics balance. Could that be improved? Likely. Do I think I would like it? I still don't think I would like it, but it might be improved upon. And then secondly, the physics aspect of the game. The aspect of the game where the physics over here are going to, again, the physics aren't fully balanced in my opinion, even though they are better at TTS. TTS doesn't work at all. The original marbles were just demolishing you, and the new marbles are better, but it still feels like Fafnir has a strong edge over the players. And so the physics aspect is not really something I don't like, so much as a general asterisk to it. What I will say is that for a physics-based game, I usually want to enjoy the physics element of the game, and for me, the physics here does produce, it is fun. I don't want to take away from the fun of it. It is fun to watch a marble roll from Fafnir and then see how things go and see how it develops and see who gets it along the way. But there's no player skill in the physics here. There's no agency over how you roll a marble to be able to knock something down. Again, once you take control of the dragon, it's a little different, but really it comes down to the marbles are chaotically rolling across the board and you're seeing how it plays out. It makes the game more crazy and less rewarding. The physics is not like skill-based physics, it's just chaos-based physics. So it's not yet balanced, and I don't know how much it fully adds to the experience. It does add some enjoyment and some chaos, but I think that the game, well, we'll get more to it in final thoughts. As far as what I can see others not liking, first of all, the game is overly complicated for the type of game it is. That is something to be mindful of, that it is a game that has a decent amount of rules overhead for a game that seems to be not entirely sure where it is as far as whether it's a more of a fun chaos game or whether it's more a strategy tableau building game, or really trying to be perfectly good at both, because I don't think it is perfectly good at both. I think it's kind of straddling both lanes, which does add something from both lanes to the game, but also puts it in that weird spot, which is hard to balance. Also, the scouting system and getting what you need to fight the dragon is a bit of a toss-up at times, because if you are trying to take down the dragon, or forget taking down the dragon, if you're trying to fight the dragon at all, whether or not you're trying to dominate it, if you're trying to fight it, you need certain runes, and your ability to have access to those runes, you may not have the right raids in play. Now again, they will come out. Monsters will repopulate, so if you kill a monster, things will eventually show up, and boom, there you go, you got your green rune over there. So you will eventually get access to things, but players who get early access to certain things based on the way they move, the turns they took, getting those raids, or even just going in it blind and getting what you need, getting access to the runes you need to fight Fafnir can sometimes be frustrating if they're not on the board when you need them. It can be a little frustrating. As far as final thoughts on Flames of Fafnir, it's a very hard one to say. I don't think the game is for me regardless, and I think that's primarily because of the semi-co-op nature of things. The semi-co-op nature, which is something I generally don't like in almost any game I've ever played. I don't like semi-co-op as a mechanic, and I do think this is a semi-co-op game. I don't see how it isn't, just the way you're not really cooperative, but you are doing something that you need to all do successfully or Fafnir wins, and then not only that, you have to actually, one player might take control of Fafnir, and suddenly it's one against many, in a whole different experience. I don't think that combination of things works for me or makes the game for me. The physics, on the other hand, is just tough to analyze in general just because of where it's at. I don't think the game is for me. I think it's in a weird place where, for me, it feels like the toy factor is here, and there is a toy factor. There's fun in a lot of the things. I don't want to minimize the fact that there is fun in the way certain things go cascading across the board, or the sheer table presence of what's going on here. This is a fun game to play. But it's not a very rewarding game to play, at least not for me. The nature of it being a little too focused on the strategy for the toy factor to not feel like it's getting in the way of that, and a little too focused on the toy factor for you to really enjoy the strategy, it's straddling both worlds in a way that, to me, didn't give me the optimal experience in either. It gave me fun in both. I had fun with my tableau, I had fun with the dragon, but it's not the ideal game experience that I'm personally looking for, with the caveats around how the physics go in the game. Again, I don't fully feel I can rate it. I can say where it is for me, because I've seen enough to know that I think I enjoy this one, but also it's not for me. But I can't properly rate it because the physics element, which is a huge element of the game, still feels like a work in progress. So that's kind of my thoughts on Flames of Fafnir. I understand what it's trying to do. It may well work for you. For me, it feels like a little bit too much like it's straddling for it to really work as well for me. As far as other game recommendations, if you want something a little on the lighter side that's going to lean into the whole dragon and the chaos and the fun, that might be a fun game to play with your kids or whatnot, Dragon Tower from Haba Games is a very charming game that is very, very accessible, very, very light, and ultimately has a dragon knocking things down, but is a much easier game to play at table and learn. And if you're looking for something that leans into the the physics element, but with a lot more strategy going on, or not necessarily a lot more strategy, but I think where it does a better job managing those two worlds. Manara is a game that has a lot of toppling towers, still leaning far more into the physics than the strategy, but it does so in a way that I think is a little bit more focused on where it's at. In any case, until next time, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co. I hope you enjoyed this video, and as always, I hope you have a good one.